That's not what you want to be seeing. Great. Thanks, Karen. Little informal tech support. Awesome. Cool. All right. Great. You know what? I'm going to just check one more thing, everybody, and then I'll be there to start. Okay, great. All right. Is it, Karen, it's different from last time, or is it the same?
Yes, it's well, it's the whole now it's your it does look different. I'll show you and then you can tell
Doesn't,
me if this is what you like. And then
I just don't want you to see the little notes thing, that's all. I've
is that
practiced
good?
this.
Mhm.
Is that just now? No, I didn't get, oh, there it is.
Yep,
Yep,
it's
that's
just
it. That's what I'm looking for. All right,
okay.
great. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. Gotcha. Okay. Um, Good afternoon, evening. It's still light outside where I live. I'm glad to see all of you here. I'm Brennan, and you are at the What's Up with College Admissions in 2022 workshop and webinar. And the goal of this is to help you see the lay of the land with college admissions right now, and also to answer any questions that you have that fit within the next hour plus. I've got a lot of questions in advance, so I designed um, a PowerPoint presentation based on those questions, and we will get to those as we can. And then at the end, you certainly can ask questions. And you can also put questions in the chat. And if you know answers or have ideas about questions that are posted in the chat, feel free to contribute, right? Because we are all a community together learning. So does anybody have anything burning or if something that's not working right before I continue? All right. So the big idea for tonight, as I just said, is to answer questions that you might have as a parent of an 8th, ninth, or 10th grader. And I expect that there are probably some 11th grade parents here too, which makes total sense because it is absolutely time for 11th graders to be thinking about um, college or post-high school planning. So glad to have you here. I will say that I thought of this workshop being focused on 8th to 10th and not 11th, just because 11th questions are different, right? There's a lot of work to be done in a short-term situation with 11th graders. In 8th to 10th, it's about what are the steps between now and 11th grade that we might need to be thinking about as a family. And that's what we're going to focus on today. But I wanted to let you know, if you are an 11th grade parent, that I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards or be available to a group of 11th grade parents because there is a lot to consider right now. So what we're going to do today overall is to consider where you want this process to go in your family, what your values are for high school and for post-high school. I'm going to reflect a little bit with you on what's just happened in this most recent cycle of college admissions in 2022, looking for trends with testing. I know that was a question on a lot of people's minds. And then thinking about the timeline for families of and students in 8th, ninth, and 10th grade about what one might be doing now to prepare for the application and decision process that is college and post-high school planning. We're also going to touch briefly on financial planning that you might want to, or that I recommend engaging in now. And people had questions about course planning and running start and two-year college options and pros and cons of those things. Um, some people were asking about special needs in college and how those are handled, or how one handles those when going through the process. And someone asked about gap year planning and when somebody might think about that. So those are the questions that I know about. And then you might have additional questions that you can post in the chat, and also we'll have some time at the end. And if we don't have time within the hour, I'm happy to stick around for a little while afterwards, or schedule additional sessions or one-on-one chats. So welcome to everybody who's here. Thank you so much for the people who are posting information about you and your family in the chat. And let's go on with what's next up. Any questions, feel free to unmute and ask anytime too, because there's a lot to manage as a one-woman show here. Just wanted to say a little bit about me. I'm Brennan. I'm a right in between being a Garfield parent. I have an 8th grader rising, and I have a first year in college son who graduated Garfield last year. And my background is in education, both as a school administrator and as a professor at Seattle University, and I've got a doctorate from UW in education and educational leadership. And during the pandemic, I pivoted, like maybe some of you did, to open this consultancy to support families and students in transformation and transition points in school, both K-12 and college. And I'm really enjoying the college piece. And one of my goals is to share what I know with my community so that everybody has access to the path to excellent education options. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm so glad you are here. And if you have any other questions about me, I'm happy to ask them, but that's not my main goal today. Main goal is helping you think about where you are with your family and your path to post high school. So right now, I would invite you, if you'd like, to think about what are your key values. When you think about high school, like, so some of your students haven't even entered high school yet. Some of your students are first year in high school, some of you 10th graders, some beyond. What are your values for yourself, for your child, if you are a parent, when it comes to what kind of experience you want to have? I put some values in the list, you know, balance, justice, joy, curiosity, community, achievement, challenge, perseverance, confidence. Obviously, there are many, many, many. In fact, I think I have a link here to a values list that I'll put in the chat. So think about, you know, what is it that's most important to you? And I invite you to post those in the chat. And obviously you might have more than one value and they might be even conflicting, but it's great to really be thinking about that. Another way to think about values is, what do I value about post high school? Like, why might I like to go to college? Why might I want my young person to go to college? And what do I want their high school experience to be like? So both of those things. And then another thing that you might want to think about and add to the chat, I invite you to do, is how do you want to parent and or be parented around post high school plans? Do you want your young people to follow what you did? Do you want your young people to do what you say? Do you want your parents to lay off? Do you want your parents to support you? How do you want to be together as a family? There's a book that I am enjoying right now that's called The Truth About College Admissions. I've got it on a later slide. It's by Brendan Barnard and Rick Clark, who are two sides of college admissions. One is a college admissions officer and the other is a high school college counselor. And they wrote a book for families to work through together. And they recommend setting a time to talk about post high school planning and to restrict it to at most once a week, right? So that it's not like an unpredictable nag that can come from anywhere, and that you're setting an intention to have your values front and center. And to come out of our best selves when we're having these conversations rather than our fear or our anxiety. And so I put a note at the bottom that for parents and families, something I learned a few years ago as a teacher and an administrator is this idea that we are the weather, that like in our, like if we're stormy, then our family's stormy, and if we're stormy in the ways that we're thinking about college or post high school, then our young people will also potentially pick up that vibe and feel that way. And so it's just, I invite you to think about these things. I'm seeing in the chat lots of values like academic excellence, broaden life experience, and you can get a fiscal sense. Yep. Curiosity, inclusion, autonomy. Great. It's a great time to, oh, and balance and exploration, financial responsibility. It's a good time to be thinking about this. So thank you for sharing those. Okay, so next, this is a little bit fuzzy, but the big idea is that there are close to actually 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States alone, never mind in the whole world. And more of my students are looking to study overseas. And so right now, there might be an idea of scarcity that, you know, it's so difficult to get into college right now. There are so many people getting rejections from places where they weren't expecting it. But I want to just show you how many places there are to go. And this is just 1,400 places on the map, and there are lots and lots more. Of course, people these days want to go where they have heard of, right? And so it's our project as families to help our young people know about places that maybe they don't see during the Final Four basketball, or on TV during football season, or on their social media platform. Because yes, there are some schools that really are over enrolled. People have asked in the question and answer, was this year and was last year actually different? Was there something actually different about what happened during the pandemic with college admissions? And I will say that what was really different was that the college admissions officers had trouble using their mathematical algorithms about who was going to accept their offers of admission. And so last year, or this current, the people who are first year students in college this year, those many of the top most desirable schools over enrolled. So more people wanted to be at college than they were expecting, partially because overseas programs were closed, partially because people had deferred admission during the close down part of the pandemic. And so, you know, there were students in triples that are meant to be singles and doubles, et cetera. And so this year, this academic acceptance season, they were trying to restrict enrollment to make sure that they didn't over enroll again. And so what we saw was that for the most popular places, yes, they received a record number of applications. There's a way to apply to college now, which is called the Common Application. And so it makes it much easier to complete one application and then click a lot of different buttons and apply to many different places. And with the trend of schools being test optional and test blind, more people were applying to more schools than they previously had. And so, yes, it was very difficult. For example, at University of Washington, there were people who in the past would have expected to gain admittance easily to the University of Washington who were not accepted this year. And partially that is because University of Washington, like other places, are getting wise to applicants who don't intend to attend. And so they're very concerned about what's called yield. And like I had a student who was a very, very top student at Garfield who got waitlisted for biology this time. Now, biology is a highly desirable major. Um, but when I asked her, would you actually go if they offered? She was like, nah, I don't think so. And so I thought, well, actually, they did a pretty good job then of reading your intent. And they gave the slot to somebody who they believed would actually fill it. So that's kind of my big takeaway from this round is that demonstrating your fit for a particular school is paramount. Um, and the ways that you can demonstrate that fit is to really research that school's mission, like why are they there? What are their values and how do they sync up with your values? Really do your research into that school, what it offers, what it cares about, who they see themselves as, what the niche that you might fill could be. And then you can visit and you can visit virtually. The pandemic was wonderful for colleges increasing their information about themselves via their websites, via YouTube, via there's an app called You Visit. So anyway, you can really visit places and get all sorts of student impressions on TikTok, on Reddit. Oh my God, that there's just a ton of information now. I think it's really worth paying attention to your writing and getting, not doing it quickly, taking time and seasoning your writing because in this time of test optional and test blind, your grades, your recommendations, and your writing are what they're going on to admit you. And what they're really looking for is students to have insight and self-reflection, self-awareness, which is hard. I'll say I have teens and they've been, locked in their rooms for a couple of years and not out and not interacting with people who are sort of calling them to that higher awareness. And so what we can do as families is be thinking about how can we help our students reflect on who they are, what their strengths are, what's important to them, what their values are, ethical dilemmas potentially, like how can we be helping them have that insight? Because that is what colleges are looking for. Colleges want like mature people who are ready to take advantage of what they have to offer. They don't expect you to be fully formed, but they do want you to be mature enough to take advantage of what they have. I guess the other thing I'll say is that I really am encouraging families and students to try to fall in love with schools that they're likely to be able to gain acceptance to. And so instead of framing it as like a safety situation, like as a lesser, as like a big L, if you get into those kinds of places, rather, what are some places that you actually might not have to completely stress about? You can gain acceptance and have a positive learning experience there. So, and then our job as family students is to expand our ideas about possible, likely, and target schools. And the final thing is to begin considering areas of interest or areas that you might want to major in. And I don't know if anybody on here was a child of liberal arts colleges, like I certainly am and was. And we were not encouraged to think of our major before we went. And more and more schools are asking for that kind of thing. There is often room to change. The research shows that people change their majors 3 times or more, but they're still asking in the application process for your areas of interest. And so one thing is that if
Well,
you have, if you
hey,
have an
Brandon,
area of, yep,
I'm
hey Jen.
curious, why are they asking for that? Is that so that they load the programs with the right majors, or
Well,
why?
great. I'm so glad you asked that question. I can tell you my perspective on it. And
Okay,
when I've asked admission, it depends on the school, Jen, really. And so I'll give the University of Washington answer, and then I'll give the Pomona College answer, which is where my son is. University of Washington, they're actually fine if you come in without a particular major, but if you want certain majors, I'm sure you've heard this, but I'll say it again, that if you want majors like computer science, engineering, business, nursing, um, and biochem, sciences really in general, if you know that you want those things, your best chance at getting to take those classes at the University of Washington is to be accepted as direct to major admit. And so that's why, because they had so many people being disappointed that they weren't able to access the classes in the majors that they had gone to University of Washington hoping for, because there just weren't enough professors to teach the classes that
right.
everybody wanted. So they decided to restrict their, and University of California calls them highly impacted majors. So just more and more schools, particularly public schools, are restricting access in the application process because they know they aren't going to be able to meet the demand once people get there. So for small liberal arts colleges like Pomona College, where my son goes, they didn't ask him to say for sure what his major is, but they did ask him to say his area of interest. And they have allowed him into classes that are in his major when other first year students were not able to get into them. And so I find that very interesting and very different from I didn't even know to ask that question. I've been going to tours, for the last few years of liberal arts colleges, and I just assumed that the goal of a liberal arts college is to let people explore. And so you would be able to take whatever class was in the course catalog pretty much. But I guess it could be that it's the highly impacted pandemic numbers, but I've been my not just my own son, around the country, people are having challenges getting access to classes that they're hoping for. And so that's the long answer there.
Cool.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah. Anything else on that? This is the big overview of 2022. Next up is testing. So anything else there? All right. So here we go to testing. So people had questions about testing, and that makes sense because it's in the news and it also impacts what students do and what we as families do with the next few years, right? Like, are we on board to be preparing for standardized tests, or are we not? And so the big idea is that right now in the country, our preparation for and taking of the SAT and ACT is very, very regional. The University of Washington, the University of California, California State, and all the Oregon schools are all either test blind, Washington and California, or test optional, Oregon. And so consequently, the being able to take the test is more and more difficult in our areas. So my current 11th graders are traveling at least an hour, hour and a half to places where they're registering for the SAT to take it, because Seattle Public Schools decided not to offer it this spring, and sounds like Seattle Public Schools will offer it in October annually, but not to juniors. So if your family is thinking of your values, and SAT and ACT is part of your plan, then it's something that you will need to go onto the College Board website or the ACT website and register for. And I'll go over the timeline later, but really you can take those tests anytime after Algebra 2. And test prep, I wouldn't advise doing intensively any longer than 3 months in advance because people lose interest and attention. And if you're doing the ACT, there are some free prep activities if you Google it. But SAT for sure has free prep activities through Khan Academy, and it's paired with your PSAT results. So if you go and log in to the College Board site, or if your student does this, you can look up both your PSAT scores, and then you can link your PSAT scores to Khan Academy, and they'll design a practice plan for you. And you can have some agency in deciding when you want to practice and how long, et cetera. But I recommend that to students. And if your student is not interested in doing that on their own, or if they intend to do it on their own, but then they don't end up doing it, I do recommend getting support with test prep if you're going to do that. The thing is, though, that it's very defensible to not do it out here. I think the whole country is understanding that we are not doing it much in the West. And so there's a place on college applications to put additional information, and you can put in there that, my high school didn't offer the SAT until October of senior year, which, really could change at any time, but that's the current plan. And so you can put that in your additional information. Now, you'll see here that there are schools that are requiring the SAT and ACT already for next year, including MIT, Georgetown, the military academies, and then the states of North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And then some places like in Arkansas and that area, some schools are asking for the scores for merit aid. So that's just important to keep watching the space. And there's a website called fairtest.org that maintains a list of the test, basically what's up with testing and who's test optional and what's happening. So you can always check that to see how things are going. Somebody asked, Bonnie, you asked when to submit scores. And the truth is that it really, really depends. And I know that's frustrating, but schools are evaluating each child, each young person's application in context of the other students at their high school. And like if all the rest of the students at the high school submit scores and all of the rest of the high school students' scores are in the 50 or the 75th percentile and above, or 50th percentile and above, then, and if you don't submit them and if you don't have some reason that really explains that, then you'll be compared there. But if you are a standout at your school in every way, and your scores are above most kids at your school, but they're not as high as the average applicant to a particular college, then it could be great to submit your scores. And so what I really recommend is researching, and you can even call the admissions representatives for our area for the schools that you're most interested in, and ask about whether they have a preference for submitting scores or not. And you can even say, let's say I got a 1250 on my SAT. Would you recommend I submit that? And they may or may not answer, but some schools are answering. Let's see, and the last thing on testing is that AP scores are playing a different role now. Not every school, but many schools are asking for students to report their AP scores as a proxy for college readiness. And it's not required. They can't require it, but some schools are looking for that. And in that case, you're wanting to submit scores like on the high end, right? Unless University of California schools, they want all your scores. If you put in a 1, 2, whatever it is, they want them. So, so I guess the answer about that is, like, for an 8th grade, 8th, 9th, or 10th grade family is, if you're in an AP class and you have a chance to take the test, go ahead and do it. And if your scores are 3, 4, or 5, preferably 4 or 5, but hey, we're all doing the best we can, then it might be worth submitting to show that you're capable of college work. Any questions on that before we go? All right, wrong way. Okay, so some people asked about the timeline. And for 10th graders, this is super relevant for you. For 8th and 9th graders, I have lost my presenter screen, but there is do I have it right here? Yes, I do, great. I'm gonna put in the chat a link to one of my favorite mentors is Ethan Sawyer, who calls himself the college essay guy. He has a lot of free tools on the web to help people. And one thing is a timeline for what a 9th grader might do, what a 10th grader might do, et cetera. And so this timeline that I'm showing here was created by Counsel More, which is a tool that I use as a professional college admissions counselor. And so there are a couple of things that aren't relevant on there, but mostly it is relevant and shows that in junior year, that's when it really starts, right in September. So if you're a 10th grader, right now you're thinking about, okay, this is actually, believe it or not, the last summer before I'm going to start really thinking about getting myself ready for applying to college. And so we're going to talk about summer in a future slide, but then it's going to start in September, thinking about building a college list. So with my students, we talk about, we spend most of junior year doing research into what are your interests, what are your passions, what are your areas that you want to explore in your post high school life, and then we're researching which places might offer that. And this is a great time, 10th graders, 9th graders, to be getting to know your teachers and thinking about developing relationships with teachers in clubs, after school, during school, who could potentially be good recommenders for you. Jen, are you ready to say something? No, okay, great. Oh, it's just highlighted in green because you were the last person to speak. Sorry about that, Jen, to call you out. Chloe asked, sorry, just to go back for a second, I'm seeing Chloe asked about no, it's fine to take an AP exam, and if you bomb it, you don't have to submit the information. It's not required in any part of college applications. It's just if you do have it to show that you're ready for college level work, then you can submit that. Great question. And Lillian asked about Running Start, and I will answer more about that later, but let me just take it since it's right there. If somebody decides to do Running Start, which is taking community college classes in 11th and 12th grade, they will be looked at similar to AP classes. It depends on the school. Some schools prefer AP because it's a standard curriculum, and they can compare apples to apples across the country and the world. But some schools really find a lot of value in dual enrollment classes, especially if the student can have articulate things to say about what they learned in those classes, right? And then it really, if the student is speaking in a mature way about handling college level classes and how they're now ready for what this next college has to offer because they've negotiated the Running Start curriculum. So it really depends, but certainly it's not looked down on. It's not a bad thing. So okay, well, so this timeline, you're thinking about teachers who might do letters of recommendation, because when you're in 11th grade, then you need to pin down who is going to write those letters of rec. And those people are generally at least academic class teachers. So yes, your coach might be able to write you a letter of rec, your boss might be able to write you a letter of rec, your art teacher might be able to write you a letter of rec, but many schools are looking for somebody who teaches you in a humanities class or a social science class or a science or a math class to write your letters of recommendation. And they're focused on how will you show up when you're here? How will you show up in class? And so, this has been really hard during the pandemic, right? Getting to know teachers, super not easy. And so 8th, 9th, and 10th graders can be reminded that it actually matters, like our relationships with adults can really be helpful to us, not just because of letters of recommendation, because it's just useful and valuable to have relationships with adults, but I really do see a lot of kids feeling very disengaged. And so whatever we can do to help people re-engage with the adults in their life, the better. And so then right now and a year from now, people are planning classes about what to take to be ready. And so we can keep answering questions about that. And I'll get to questions about APs with that. And then it's about a year from now, I mean, in 11th grade, if you're a 10th grader. So in 11th grade in the spring is when you start working on your applications and your drafts, etc. And then over the summer, and then ideally in the fall, early fall, they're done. University of Washington's application deadline is in November, and they are not alone. So, and since at least I applied to college, there's been a huge boom in applying early. Colleges now have multiple deadline times, and so November 1st is a popular college deadline. And so when I'm working with 11th graders, currently I'm asking them to plan to be done with drafts by October 15th so that we can submit things by either November 1st or November 15th. So let's see what else. And then testing, we just covered, and I said before that you can really take the SAT or the ACT anytime after Algebra 2. And so you certainly can do that anytime in junior year or earlier, really. But you would have to do it on your own because our public schools are not going to offer it prior to that. Okay, anything else here? All right. SAT question in the chat, just checking. Yes, no problem with taking it in the fall of 11th grade. Yep. It's an unusual move, but it is only in Seattle is it an unusual move. So it's, yeah, definitely something worth considering. Okay, so if you are trying to get out of my way here. Great. Okay, so here are some steps of things that I think I've probably already talked some about, but things that you can be doing. So if you just joined us, we started off thinking about what are your values for your young person's high school time and for their post high school. So what are the goals that are guiding, and that we as families are the people who can help set the tone for what is this? Is this a time about balance? Is this a time about high achievement? Is this a time about fun, like what is it? And so the more you can spend time clarifying those values in these next few years, the better the process will go for your young person. And then as a family, it's super important to be thinking and if you parent with someone, to be talking with that other person about, are there parameters that we want to set on our college search? And we're thinking about location, financial, academic, and social fit. I'm going to have a slide later about financial, but I did just want to highlight that if you came from a middle-class family, it's possible that you got the message that kids should be able to go wherever and that parents should just come up with the money for kids to go to that school. And more and more, we're being encouraged to think about what what are our financial goals? What is our financial means? And what are our financial values? And it's okay not to just say, sure, we'll work it out wherever you want to go. To really think about setting parameters in advance. And you can just, whoever's judging you, that it was okay. All right. And so you can also be visiting likely schools either virtually or in person. And I'm suggesting maybe don't go to a bunch of the unlikely schools. And what I mean by unlikely is the schools that have, less than 20% admissions rate or less than 10% admissions rate. Some people go to Boston, they're like, let's go to the Harvard campus and let's dream about Harvard. And that's great. And it's fine as long as you are really framing it like this is unlikely for everybody in the entire world. But just be thinking mindfully about setting expectations and hopes, and maybe visiting places that are attainable. Just when you're on a vacation, or you can be having those times when you as a family have agreed to look for places, and you go on websites and look at virtual tours and things like that. Things that 8th through 10th graders can be doing is thinking about their extracurricular activities and their summer activities. And I've got slides just about that just coming up next. And before, I haven't mentioned anything about this, but something to really think about is my 8th through 10th grader a specialized person in a sport or in a national level competition of some sort, science, debate, language, ethics, lots of different things. If so, think about what supports that your young person needs in order to be doing the college application with that recruiting kind of piece. And so if they're a recruitable athlete, there's a whole NCAA process for that. I'm hoping that your coach would have resources for that, but if not, some resources that I trust are a coach named Renee Lopez, who has a Facebook group, and she has a book about negotiating that whole process. And there's a college counselor in Washington here who specializes in athletes, and his name is Dave Best. There may be lots of other resources out there, but those are the ones that I know of and use regularly. Okay, and so here are some more specifics about academics. So again, clarify your family's values. And then if you're a student, you can be, I really hope you will meet with your high school counselor at least annually. And the thing is that if my son was at Garfield, and so if you're at a public school, a lot of times the counselor isn't going to seek you out, right? They have a lot of people on their caseload, and so you want to just make sure that you are touching base and letting them know that you're ready to meet, and that you have plans and hopes and dreams, and that you can't wait for them to work with you on it. So keeping them up to speed on what you're doing. And then about courses, the rigor in courses is important, and grades count. So if there are students on here, I just want to tell you that it's not to stress you out, it's not to anything, but just to say they do count. From the first day of 9th grade on, there is this thing called grade point average, or GPA, that's being calculated each semester. And that is what you submit for applying to college these days. And in this test optional, test blind environment, the courses that you take and the grades that you get and what your teachers have to say about you is a big part of finding a college that's a good fit for you. And so what do I mean by rigor? I mean, it's a challenge for you. There's not a universal standard because everybody's different. It's a challenge, but it's not too challenging. It's not so difficult that you're getting consistently grades lower than a B. It's not so difficult that you're miserable, right? Like, we want to be enjoying our learning and getting something out of it. And we really can't get things out of things that are just so difficult that we're miserable all the time. So you want to find courses that challenge but not break you. And if there are things that happen along the way where courses didn't go as you expected, there were difficulties, etc., there's a section on the college application called additional information where you can explain what happened. You know, like I have an 11th grader who has a D in AP calculus. Not the plan. That was not the plan. So we're needing to be explaining that in the additional information. And the thing is, it's not the end of the world. There will be options for this person, and you know, it's going to work out. But that was too difficult. That's too much. That's not the that's not the kind of rigor that schools are looking for. They want they want challenging classes and you get an A, right? And so, you know, of course, that's not reasonable or possible and everything, but yeah, I do encourage families to normalize getting a tutor. The tutors are not for losers. Tutors are for winners. Tutors are for people who see what they need to learn and go and grab the ring. And I guess another thing that 8th through 10th graders can be doing is thinking about their high school graduation requirements and getting them out of the way in 9th and 10th grade, including volunteer service. So before you're ready to work for money, get that done now. All right, I'm going to take a pause and a breath. There's more on the next slide, but feel free to put more questions in the chat if you want to. I just went the wrong direction again. Here we go. For extracurriculars in summer, I really would encourage students to think about, is there something that or that you enjoy? There are interest and aptitude assessments out there for free on the web that can help you if you are completely clueless about things that you might enjoy doing. And if you could take something that you do enjoy doing and spread it to others, engaging with your community, that would be a wonderful thing to do with either extracurriculars and summer. Thinking about if it's a financial fit, if it's some sort of challenge, some sort of stretch for you, that's great. Or you can go deep into something that you already enjoy. Like I'm thinking about one of my students who really loves being outdoors and outdoor education. And so she started a camp for younger kids to be enjoying things outdoors, right? So she's like going deep into something that she already enjoys. Colleges are looking for activities that students do that help them identify their qualities, their interests, their skills, their values that they're going to bring to a college community. So they're not really interested in a lot of box checking or a quantity of extracurricular activities or summer things. They're looking for things that are engaging to the student, and the student can then have something to say about what they did, what they learned, and how they're going to bring it or not bring it. Like, you know, I have one student right now who's like, do I have to keep doing, you know, color guard? Like, I really don't like it. And I said, totally, you don't have to keep doing it unless you can figure out a way to make it joyful, and you can have increased responsibility and leadership, etc. And you would want to potentially bring what you're learning from that to college. Otherwise, if it's just like, I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, you know, you can tell a story about that too when you're thinking about college. Like, what did I learn from quitting that and finding something else that I do enjoy that that did feed me, right? So kids don't have to do things that are like painful to them just because they're going to look good to colleges. Colleges see right through that. Okay, they want kids who are actually engaged and who are going to bring that engagement to their school. And I will say that the summers that are easiest to incorporate into applications are the ones after 9th and 10th, because the summer after 11th grade, you're already working on writing your applications. So no, don't worry. Like, I'm not saying that to stress you out about like, okay, it's almost summer and it's so important, I need to have a high-powered internship. I don't mean that. I just mean, you know, it's really, it was a surprise to me when I thought about that. Like, oh, actually, by summer after junior year, I'm like, I'm done. I'm ready. I'm applying. So, and then if you can get your young people to read for pleasure to expand their vocabulary, more power to you. And that is an important thing to do during summer, if at all possible. And I'm here to say that, and you can tell your kid that I said they had to. Yeah. All right, let's see if I can go to the next slide. Okay, so I just thought that this slide might be something you could take a picture of, or you can post information. If the kids were on the line, they could answer in the chat. Just to help young people think about how they might like to spend their summer, or how they might like to engage in extracurricular activities. I don't know if it's happened in your family, but a lot of families had the experience of the pandemic just absolutely squashing people's joy and interests. And so it's, as families, we are helping our young people discover their joy and their inquiry again. And so these are some prompts that might be able to help with that. I also have this massive spreadsheet I'm going to put into the chat. Okay, hold on. I lost it again. Well, nope. Okay, well, when I find that little presentation slide thing again, I will put it in the chat, but a list of extracurriculars and summer stuff. All right. Okay. Okay, here's my list of potential summer and break activities. Anything I didn't already talk about. It can be a good time to stick in a little test prep. It can be a fabulous time for those volunteer service hours. It also can be a great time for job shadowing. You know, like my 8th grader's like has not that many ideas about what he might like to do in the future, which makes total sense. He's 14. But one thing we're talking about is how to help him have a time, even an hour, a half an hour, to have an informational interview or a job shadowing opportunity with people he knows, just to learn about what kinds of jobs they do. And or if your young person does have ideas about careers, then using your LinkedIn or encouraging them to create a LinkedIn profile and search for people who do those kinds of things and hook up with them. And you can, again, tell them that I said it would be okay because they might be like, oh, seriously, mom. But it really is a great time. Like, adults are dying to help young people right now get connected to careers. All right. Okay, so here's my pitch for financial planning. That's great to hear that, Jen, what Sky's going to be doing this summer, Jen. Thanks. And feel free, others, to post about things about art. Oh, yeah. Let me go back then. And Jen has got a question. How do you list activities like art that are independent? Yeah, it's so cool. On the college application, there's a whole section, depending on the kind of application you're doing, that's about your activities. And you totally can say that you spend hours a week or day or whatever doing art or sustainable clothes shopping or teaching yourself a new skill or learning guitar or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be officially through an organization or sponsored by the school. It can be, the colleges just want to know, how do you spend your time? How do you spend your time? My big question is, what about all of the kids who are spending all of their time playing video games in the basement? I don't actually think that that's what they're looking for, but I'm researching this right now. Yeah, exactly. Snapchat, LOL. Yeah. So I think there are things that you can put on there and things that maybe you could put on there in kind of a little funny way. But you know, they're looking for things that not every teen is doing, right? So we can assume that most teens are on social media and TikTok, but like if you're on TikTok and you have more than 10,000 followers, like I know somebody that I work with, I mean, that's something that you're going to be putting in your activities list, right? Like that's pretty unusual. So what is it that you do that makes you who you are? And you're allowed to list those things for sure. Yeah. Okay, so on the whole financial planning, it is right now is the perfect time, right? Because it's tax season. You're thinking about how much you have and how many taxes you're paying, etc. It'd be a great time to plug in some of your income information to a net price calculator, which is the word for each college has one on their website. It's a free thing. You can put in like, here's, well, first you'd need to do your expected family contribution, sorry. And you can do that in a program called EdMit or another one called College Aid Pro, or there, if you just Google EFC calculator, you can put in your financials and they'll say what your expected family contribution per year will be. So what reminds me, one of my clients at the beginning of this year put in their financial information. They said, oh, it says $140,000. That's perfect because we've saved $100,000. So we only have to come up with $40,000. And I was like, no, actually, that is your annual expected family contribution of $140,000. So they're expecting that every year you will be able to pay $140,000 for college. And he was like, oh, we're screwed. So it's really, really important, especially for 8th, 9th, and 10th grade families, to be thinking about this financial piece first. I know it's like, oh God, I don't want to, don't make me, but this is a gift to your child. This is the most useful, helpful thing you could do to be getting them ready for college, is to get your financial house in order about what your values are and what you can afford to pay for. And so, or what you want to pay for, right? This is a list of things that you might do. There are schools that have merit-based aid, which did not exist to the degree it does when I was applying to college. And basically, it's like an incentive to come. It says it's merit-based, but they give, some schools give merit for GPAs of 2.8. I mean, so it's really just like, we need you to come, so please come, and we'll give you this money to come. And then there are other schools that are highly, 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 highly desirable, and they also meet 100% of somebody's need. And so if you are a middle-class family, like my client with the $140,000 a year, but they've only saved $25,000 a year, those families are probably going to want to look at a merit-based aid school, but those merit-based aid schools are not the ones, like they're not the Stanfords, the Harvards, the Yales, et cetera. And so it pays to really think about this, okay? So you're thinking about your savings, your current contributions, what you want to do for loans, what your financial values are, and then think about whether you want to set any parameters. And so I'm going to show you a next slide. Somebody asked about, what are the schools in the Pacific Northwest that still give merit aid? And this is a little bit hard to see, I'm sure, but this is from a program called College Aid Pro that has a free version that allows you to compare 3 schools. I pay for this, so you won't be able to free get this kind of thing, but you can, as an individual, subscribe to them. But you can also use those other free resources that I was saying on the previous slide, like EdMit. Anyway, but you'll see that the schools that have the blue check by them are private schools, because that was what somebody asked about. And so you'll see like Eastern Washington University is $25,000 regardless of the person's money or their grades in school. But Whitman College, for example, is a private, and its overall cost is $73,000 a year per year over 4 years, right? That would be around 300-ish. And but it goes down to $41,000 for this family because this family had need and had high academics. And you can go down the list and look for the privates that have differences between their overall cost. That is all in cost of attendance, okay? On the left is the cost of attendance, and on the right is what that family, based on their financials and their GPA, would be asked to pay per year. And so, for example, I added in University of Arizona because I just wanted to highlight that there are some schools out there that use merit aid to the degree that you could get something far less than our state school price by applying to University of Arizona, which is a very well-respected school. They have a really rocking honors program, and you could get that for $15,000 a year. If you have a 3.9 or a 4.0, and slightly more than that if you have a 3.7 or 3.5, etc. Let's see. And then like Willamette, Whitworth, all those schools go down into the 40s. And then let's see where University of Washington is at 30,000. And you'll see it stays the same for most students. I have heard about students getting big merit scholarships at University of Washington as well, but it's not typical. It's typical that you would pay the full price. Let's see, questions about this slide or anything financial? Okay. All right, this is my overly texty resources slide because people were asking about ways to learn more about colleges. Lots of books out there, of course. Books I'm enjoying right now are this one, Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions. That was a fascinating read if you're looking for something that's like a page turner about, well, for me anyway, it was, I don't know, but a page turner about what it's actually like inside the admissions offices, like at the tables where they're making the decisions and stuff. Was kind of fascinating. This one, The Price You Pay for College, super helpful. Ron Lieber, who writes for the New York Times, put together a lot of his columns and research and helps walk that through. This one, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, I think is super helpful in this environment of the, like elusive, what is it? There are only 17,000 slots at the top 12 schools. And, if we take the top 3% of all of the graduating seniors in the country, that top 3% is 100,000 kids. And so, the top 3 kids in a class are not going to be able to get into those top schools. And so this idea of, you're going to be all right. And in fact, you might end up president or CEO of some major corporation, even if you went to, Eastern Washington University, right? Or, it doesn't determine who you are. Lots of different online resources, college express lists and rankings, I'll say at the end, because it's so confusing. Which ranking do you use, right? I mean, the US News and World Report, I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but they're in a bit of disrepute for people not being honest in their reporting. And so I recommend College Express, and there's a link there that's called Lists and Rankings, and those are by reputable people and comparing apples to apples, not all craziness. And there are a lot of government resources for college searching too. And one is the college scorecard that allows you to compare colleges and how students have done who've graduated from those schools, kind of like thinking about that return on investment issue. Let's look in here. Does it matter for in-state or out-of-state? Back to the financial groups. Back to this one, John, you're asking, does it matter for in-state versus out-of-state? Yes, it does. This person whose stats are showing here is in-state in Washington. And so that 30,000 for University of Washington is the in-state price. Out-of-state, I actually don't know exactly, but it gets closer to 55, something like that. And if we are going out of state, like to all the University of California schools that people are interested in, we are paying full price there, which is about 70,000. There is something called the Western Undergraduate Exchange, WUI, Western Undergraduate Exchange. And that is a list of schools that will give in-state tuition to out-of-state kids. It's not exactly, it's like in-state plus a little bit. And so like one of those schools that's closest to us is Oregon State University, which is super top ranked in sciences, computer science, engineering, things like that. And they will give us like in-state tuition plus a half or something. And there's a whole list of schools in Utah, Montana, Arizona, all the Western states that have that. Great. Good. All right. So let's see what else we've got. Okay. So we're on to your questions. Oops, going the wrong way. Sorry, I haven't figured out this thing apparently. Yes, College Express was the name of the ranking thing. There are actually, Forbes is decent for rankings. The Times of London has rankings that are decent. Is there another ranking that's coming to mind? College Express, though, is what I had said before. Let's see. So Running Start, I'm totally going to get to that. Just APs are jumping out to me. So I think I didn't highlight before, but I said it on the slide that the number of APs really depends on your young person. If your young person can take 5 APs and do well, like I'm saying A minus and up, like, I mean, really, because if you're going to take 5, you should be able to do that well in them, because otherwise you should not take 5 APs. And if they can be well health-wise, right? Not be getting themselves sick, getting your family sick, etc. Then people around the country do that. That is true. At Garfield, where my son went, we had to sign something if he wanted to take more than 3, and 3 was the expected limit. And so that is also reasonable, right? Like it just depends on the kid. But I have found personally, this is now personally, that sometimes those AP classes are taught more consistently than the classes that aren't AP. Now, it totally depends on the teacher, completely. But sometimes you get a better class if you sign up. So it's really, it depends. That's my answer there. But you'll be shocked to know that people around the country have access to like every AP there is, and there are kids taking, 17 to 20 APs during their high school careers. They're taking linear algebra, multivariate calculus. Like, I mean, it's crazy. But luckily, our kids are compared to their peers at their high school, and most of our high schools do not offer that many AP classes, and students are not taking those classes to the same degree. So it really just matters how you're doing given the water that you swim in. So that's APs. Anything else about APs? All right, Running Start or College Promise, they're 2 different things, but they're both at community college, so that's why I stuck them together. Running Start for 11th or 12th graders, I think I put here. Oh my God. Okay, I don't know how to make that work better. Light touch. Apparently I'm going to talk about special needs for a sec. If you're a person who came in with questions about special needs, there are some specialized colleges for students with more profound special needs than than a reading challenge. Landmark and Beacon are both excellent places, and they're expanding. So I would totally look into them. And then there are universities with supplemental programs baked into their regular programming. And 2 that are really outstanding in my mind as having those kinds of programs are Syracuse and University of Arizona, and I would look into those. And there are other similar supports at schools all around the country. And there are people who are stronger in that than others, but most people who support, most high school counselors and private college counselors should be able to support really anybody with special needs. Most of us are from educator backgrounds. And I really have enjoyed learning from a video and a podcast called Autism Goes to College, and I would recommend that as well. All right, let's see if I can get that other slide back. Nope, there we go. So with Running Start, the big idea is that you take classes at area community colleges, and generally you choose one, and it doesn't have to be the one that's closest to you. It could be the one that offers the kinds of programs you're interested in. Many people in Central Seattle go to Seattle Central because of convenience, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the pros of doing that are you can take 3 classes at a time instead of 6 classes at a time. And you take those 3 classes for 10 to 12 weeks, and you do a whole year's worth of learning in those 11 to 12 weeks. So that's a pro if you want to keep things moving quickly and like to go deep into subjects at restrict the number of subjects you're going deep in at once. That can be great. The con of that is that it is only 11 to 12 weeks and then you're done. And so some kids, that's not enough time to balance it. And it's also a whole other learning platform. And your high school counselor at school is no longer really your counselor. And you're kind of like on your own in, negotiating being at college. Yes, there are some supports for you for sure. But it's not just like high school. And so for some people it's awesome, and for some people it's not a good fit. And so that definitely is something to talk more with your family and with your high school counselor. And I can definitely support people with that too. I just want you to know that it's not an all or nothing decision. You can take some classes at high school and some classes at Running Start. So for example, you could take 1 class per quarter at Running Start and take 4 classes if you're in a 6-period day at high school, or something comparable if you're in an 8-period day. And it can be a really good option for expanding what is available to you to take. My son did a partial and he was able to take digital analytics and data science and things that he wouldn't have been able to take at high school, and that was great. And so why you might want to do 2 years of college before you go to a state university through our free college program in Seattle called College Promise is that you'd get 2 years of college free before you go on, and that can be awesome. And that is a great program. You just have to register by late January of 12th grade. It kind of is surprising. And you cannot take a gap year if you want to do that. So those are the downsides, or that's the downside of that. Other than that, it's a great deal. So any questions about that? All right, and the last thing about gap years, I think that's a really good question about when to take a gap year. And there is a whole association set up for that now called the Gap Year Association. They've got a great website with lots of information about what you might do and how you might think about that. So what other questions do people have? Boop. This is just a slide I'll keep in the background. This is who I am. I'm Brennan. I'm a Garfield parent, and I also have this consultancy supporting people in finding their just right next school, either K-12 or college. And I just wanted to offer this today for you to be able to ask questions and discuss with each other and with me about your questions. So let's see what's come up in the chat. When researching colleges, what is the best way to tell what the school specializes in? I mean, your average state school has all programs, so is there a way to narrow it down? Good question. Well, some of those resources that I'm not going to scroll back to right now because it might be messy, like the guide to colleges. There's one called the Fisk Guide to Colleges, and there's another one called the Princeton Review, 387 something best colleges or something, can be a good place to start because it gives a summary of schools and their strengths and weaknesses. Let's see, that's a good place to start, but it's certainly not the end all be all. You also can use that College Express lists and rankings, and you can search for topics like schools that are strong in X, and they'll give you a list of those schools and you can research more about it. Another thing is to look on reviews of the sites. So there's this one called Unigo, which has student reviews of schools. And so you could look for reviews of particular departments. You could also look at that college scorecard, which is produced by the government, which looks at graduates of particular areas and how they've fared in society, like in jobs and things like that afterwards. And you can look on YouTube for reviews. And then you can really dig into the departments on the academics section of websites and departments. Like if you wanted to learn about, you know, the Department of Geology at the University of Washington and who was teaching there and what their research is about and what classes are offered, etc. You dig into that academics section of the website and it's really all there. It's really remarkable what is available. So those are some top of mind thoughts, and I'll write the FISC guide in there too. FISC guide to colleges, College Express lists and rankings. Anybody else have input? I know others here have gone through college searching and might have favorite search tools. Okay.
I actually haven't used this one, but I'm wondering, have you tried looking at the common data set?
Oh yeah. Do you want to explain what that is, or you want me to?
Um, Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So there's this thing called the Common Data Set. Every school is required to report to the government, really, but to put it publicly, answers to questions about who applies, who's accepted, who majors in what, everything about them and their student population. And so you can Google common data set for whatever school and look in detail about them. I, Karen, don't use that anymore because I pay for some services that compile that common data set so that I don't have to go and research each college's common data set. But for sure, that's totally publicly available and free. I'll just say what are the things that I subscribe to in case as an individual you'd like to subscribe to. One is called College Kickstart, which I think is awesome. They pull together all the common data set information. It's not cheap for me. Yeah, thanks, Martin. Niche, I have mixed feelings about, and I love College Board stuff, but I'm really not liking the College Board right now, so that's why I wasn't promoting them. And CapEx, yes, a lot of people like those for sure. Thank you. Good stuff.
Have my daughter would not let me look at her Naviance, but is that a
Oh
tool
yeah.
that you can use as well? Like she just would not. But I
That's
think that's
funny.
something that every Garfield student gets anyhow.
Yes, every Seattle Public School student does actually. Yes, it is an effective search tool. The people in my professional field don't like it as much as some of these other tools, but yes, absolutely. And it's free and publicly available to everyone. And it has on there like interest and aptitude assessments. It has, if you're interested in this and this is your GPA, here are some schools you might be interested in. Here are schools in your general area you might be interested in. It lets you do all sorts of searching. And so, yes, I would highly recommend. And in fact, it's required for students to get on Naviance and to put information about their activities on Naviance so that their school counselor can use it to write their recommendation. So school counselors write something about each student on their caseload to send to colleges. And some of them have just boilerplate language, but it's great to send your counselor some additional information to make sure that they write something that's like as tailored to you as possible. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? I love, Martin, that you put in your information or ideas. So if there are others who have input like that, feel free to unmute or feel free to put in the chat. Okay, I don't even know who all is still here, 17 of you. Are there other questions that you came with that we didn't discuss? Yeah, Martin, great idea. I think I'm going to put it on my website, and maybe I'll figure out how to email it all to you too. I'd be glad for your daughter to watch it, and if there are other ways we can get the information out, that would be great. I'll say that each high school has somebody who's in charge of college admissions information, and so it's often kind of like the kids don't think they know about it, but if you just reach out, they'll likely have things on YouTube and videos that the kids can watch that's all about college admissions that they just didn't even know was there because they're busy on their own little worlds. But there are people at the high school whose job it is to do that. Yeah. You're so welcome to everybody who's saying thank you. Yes, Jenna, yes, I remember Guthrie from preschool. Yes, it's so great to see everybody. Yeah, great. Well, if I ever can be a resource, please let me know. It's definitely part of my mission is to just get the word out about information and information sharing is doing that. So thank you so much for coming and spread the word, right? About like, you know, there's this person, she's a Garfield parent and she's happy to help. Happy to be in touch. Okay. Because it's a lot to navigate, right? It's a lot to navigate. Parenting in the time of pandemic is hard work, and it's nice to be together and doing it together. So, yeah. Anybody having something they're looking forward to this evening? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let me see about getting this recording stopped. Thank you to everybody who's been here. And I can stop the recording so that, there we go.